Good morning, everybody. This is Andy sitting in for Tim. Supposedly he thinks I know what I'm doing, so I'm doing it. This is WX Live Webinar 144 with Glenn Rathke. This is Universal Translator. I'm going to leave it over to Glenn and let him get after it. There you go.
Well, good morning, everybody. What I've got and what I want to show today is a universal import-export, and it's called, at least as of right now, Smart Import. And what we'd like to do is take a source database, a from database, and a to database, and then the from tables and to tables, and map them so we could export and import the tables. And I had done that in my training materials before to some extent with CSV and with hyperfiles. So now we decided to extend it to SQL databases. And so when we first did it with hyperfiles, it really wasn't that difficult at all. We used HListItem, and you could map everything nicely. We get to SQL, and there's some more, well, there's some difficulties in there. So let me run this and show you what it looks like and what it does and some of the features. And then we can go back and look at the code. So let me just run this. And I have a list of imports that I'm working with, but let's just go create a new one. So I'll add an import, and we'll just call it, oh, in fact, let's do this. Let's just call it basic. I guess I'll check another basic. There we go. Okay. We've got, our data can come from multiple places. So the first thing we can look at is I have my data. And these are the different drivers that I have installed that pretty much come with WINDEV. And we can go and select data. Let's say we want to look at access. So we can select access, go out and find the test file, and then we can test it. And what I'm wanting to do is, whether it's a SQL database or a flat file database or whatever, I wanted to be able to possibly list the tables, if that makes sense, so you can see that it's the right database. And here's the database. It's got 2 tables, not an awful lot. You'll notice that we can go back and we can say, okay, we want to do HF Classic. We'll select that, and we can test the connection, and we're fine. Doesn't show the tables because there's no need to. We're just working with one table. I'm not working with a folder. The other data that we can do is have a server list. And so this would be a list of the servers that you have configured. So you, as a developer, if you want to distribute this and use it with an application, and you want them to go to your data, but you don't want them to see the server settings, you could just pre-configure this list. The other thing that you can do is let the end user add their own servers in here with the maintenance. Now, when you go back and look at the pre-configured servers that would have been for your client, they can't see that, so we hide that with the password for the user ID and password, those things, but they could add their own. So let's just say we want to look at let's take SQL Server native. So that's going to my training database. We'll test the connection. Oh, that's good. Yeah. Let's, you know what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to, for right now, I'm going to switch over to version 19. I had just moved this over to 20.
My bad.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, we just moved it over and didn't even run it. So let's select this, go to Smart Import. And let's run this. Okay. Okay, so we'll go back and we'll add this. And we will do the server list again. We will go to the SQL Server native. We'll test that connection. And we'll say, yes, we want to look at those tables. We can then do the same thing over here, and we can go to the same My Data, or we can go to the server list, and I will pick that, the server list. We will pick, for right now, SQLite, and this is a basic that I've got, and I'll show you what that is. Yeah, we'll look at that. There's the one table that's in SQLite. Now this basically is pretty much the mapping for the databases. We pick our source database or our from database on the left. We pick our target database or the to database on the right. And we've got two buttons here, map all matching fields. So if they're all got the same name between the two tables, we can just do that. It brings our fields across. Or if we wanted to map, and let me go and remove this so we can show that. We'll delete this. Or we can actually just map the fields. So if they had different names, you would just select them down here and we'll say, we'll map that field. Okay. So for right now, I don't want to use that field because that's my primary key and I don't want to force that value in there. So that's all there is to the mapping for doing two tables from two different databases or two tables from the same database. Doesn't matter. So now what we do is we come up and says, since you don't have a where clause, would you like to verify how many records you may process during the import export? And so we'll say yes. And so there'd be 268 records. And I want to limit that. So what we'll do is we'll select a field and we'll do db type equal MSSQL. See if we get back just a few records. We do. And that's what we're expecting. So that mapping is all done. When we go over to the import or the running of that side, you can see we have a whole bunch of these imports as we mentioned before. And the nice thing is we could tag which ones we want to run. So say you have a reoccurring import export that you want to do, just leave these tagged and you can either run this screen directly or just call the procedure from here and it would run all your imports for you. Now, I would like to go back and I want to do this again. And what we'll do is we will select the advanced import, which is just similar to what we had done, except we're going from DB3, we're going to SQLite. We'll test this connection, we're fine. Test this connection, no. Now you'll notice we now have some additional fields. When we run the import, we have it as basic, intermediate, and advanced. So the first one we saw was basic, this one now is advanced. So we can put whatever W language code we want before the processing of the import and after the processing of the import. The only thing is I don't allow exec, call, drop, truncate, delete all, those kinds of things. And so if we wanted to modify that, we just go to a window here, we do a compile on it to make sure that it will compile fine. And so that's some of the advanced features. Now when we go to the import again, you'll notice that we have before table processing, we have after table processing where we can do the same kind of coding, and again we don't allow the exec, the call, truncate, drop, those kinds of things. Now there's a few other things we've added, and we can also do W language for each of the fields. We can do a before and after every single field, which also means if you do before the first field and then at the last field, you can do before and after each record. Okay? And then I thought, oh, there'd be one other thing that would be nice to have, and that would be if we could offer a default value. So we can go to any of the fields, and then we can put in a default value, and it is, let's see if there's another type of field. Okay, we go to real, modify that, then the mask comes up for the proper mask for the field that you're on, or field type. Let's go back to this, W line, cancel. Default value, put in, and so now every time this record is written, instead of taking the value of the DB type from my dbase3 file, we're just going to force in the value DB test. And we have a where clause here also. Okay. So let's just go over to this side. And let's see, we will run the SQLite Advanced, and we should be getting, no, that's not the one, this one here, I'm sorry. This, we run this. So there's our code that would be running before the import, before the table, before the record, after the record, And again, we only have 2 records for here: before the record, and after the table, after the import. Okay, now it's successful. Now, there's a few other things that I wanted just to show in here. And if we go to SQL Server, let's see. And let's test this connection, because every time we go in to look at an import, we have to verify still that our connections are valid, the data's there. Now, you'll notice, and we'll look at the setup for this, since this is SQL Server, I can turn off the auto increment or use the, oh, what's that called? The insert. I'm losing what that's called.
Identity insert.
Identity insert. We can turn that on, which is really turning auto increment off. And we can also turn off triggers. And so when we would actually select that, it will tell us when we're finished with working on that table, whatever we've activated or deactivated will reverse that process at the end of that table.
Glenn, you get your sharing on for everyone?
I believe I do.
Oh, at the top. Okay, because I keep seeing my own when I talk. My eye come up.
Maybe if it's Jeff on right now, ask him if he can see my screen. That would be terrible if we went through all of this.
Well, no, it's only when somebody talks. I just noticed it when Pete coughed.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that's some of the features in here. And what we also do is we have a list of the servers that we have installed and which ones we're actually going to be using in the application. And then we say if it's whether it's a server-based, folder-based, or file-based, because like dBase, we're file-based on that. So we just have some setup things that we include with this. We also have a list of the servers that we talked about. So if we go into, this is the predefined server, so I'm hiding some things in here. And this is one that I believe I added afterwards. Yeah. And this is the one I would have added afterwards, just as a client would add. And then you can see that I'm not hiding the information down here. So that's pretty much how the import works and what it does. I've got like 60-some different tests, different databases I go back and forth. I've not done a whole bunch of records. For all of these tests, it's a whole quantity of 2 that I do, but I do 5,000, 10,000 to make sure how it's working, that it's doing what we want. Now, let's run this again, and then I'll show you some specifics, and we'll talk about some of this. If we go to, here's the other thing. Let's go to drivers. Let's look at the SQL Server native SQL Server. I need to have my glasses on today. Okay, so it's here. Nope, that's SQLite. Son of a gun. If anybody's saying it offhand. Well, I guess I can pick up any of these. I can do Postgres. Is the list here? Well, let's just go into here. We have 2 different ways of retrieving information on the fields and within the table. And we can use HListItem, which brings back all the fields for us and all the attributes as they see them. Or we can actually put a SQL statement in here to return part of the schema, which would give you the definition of the table with all the fields. So when we run this, let's go to MySQL. That should do it. Modify.
While he's doing that, if you have any questions, go ahead and post them up there, and we'll see what we can answer for you.
Okay, so when we go over to this table, you'll notice that we have the field is a varchar, int, or decimal. And so if this were using HListItem, I would be coming back with a numeric value. Well, what I've noticed is in some of the databases, but it's particularly MySQL, is they return the native driver returns with HListItem, returns the same value whether the field is a bit or a tiny int. and that was causing me all kinds of grief. So I decided to go back and say, okay, let's use the schema to actually return the field type back for us. And you can see here's bit and here's tiny int. So the schema can tell us the true attribute of that field, what kind of field it is. If we go over to, let's see, let's do access. Modify that. Modify this. Now, if I come in here and look at, here's my values of from HListItem. So I map those across, accordingly. So now, since this mapping is based on field to field, I need to know what kind of field we're coming from, but more importantly, what kind of field we're going to. So as we map these across, I store that information in each one of these lines. So whenever we run this import, every single line is self-contained, and all I have to do is loop through this table, right? Read what the field name is, where it's going to, and then depending what type it is, whether it's SQL, we use the schema to retrieve that field attribute. We will actually use formatting for formatting SQL values. And if it's HListItem, because the values come back differently, I handle those just a bit differently. So with all these imports, with the exception right now, and I'm doing Hyperfile, Hyperfile Classic, I'm doing SQL, Native, and OLEDB, Progress, and SQLite. We're doing MS Access, dBase 3. And so right now, with the exception of well, all the SQL ones are using, with the schema, they're using the insert. In fact, all of them are using insert SQL statement. Hyperfile Classic, I am using the hadd. And the reason for that is, if I wanted to turn off the auto increment, I can't turn it off with a SQL statement. So I figured, let's just do the hadd. Let's use what we're doing. Auto increment, I believe, is what it's called, and we can turn that on or off so we can handle the same kind of things. So let me go take a look at some of the code in here, because this what we'll look at is really the guts of the whole thing, and it's called import tables. And so everything else that wraps around this is just pre-packaging it ready to read this table and queries and process each of the mapping fields. Okay, and there's a couple things we'll look at of how we do the setup. But we have a select template, and I have an insert template. So we basically can say, hey, select %1 from %2, and %3 is the where clause if we have one. And then we have an insert template. Well, in its simplicity, what we're doing is let's see where we're at here. We're looping through, and in fact, just want to see where we're on here. Okay, we're going to loop through. Okay, that's what we had there. Okay, we loop through, and what we do is we keep on getting our value that we're reading, okay? And we actually go and do a format. So let me take a look and see here. When we've got a SQL table that we're going to be using an insert in, we come in here and we check to see what type of field it is. Okay, and so if it's a real or numeric int or int, we just really don't have to do anything with it. But if it's a date, and we all love working with dates and times, and we have to come in and see what the value is that's coming in and what kind of format it is. And one of the things that we needed to do is, when we got a date coming in, and as you can see, it's going to be, and we actually build it with a single quote around there. So we have to build a format. We put the single quotes around it so we can write it out to our insert statement. But the other thing that we need to do is, if it's not a valid date, or if we're going to add a default value of null, we never want to put the single quotes around the null. Okay. And so here's how we handle each of the fields. And of course, you don't realize how many different formats that come from the different databases. You know, working with MySQL and or SQL Server, and then I get to MySQL, and all of a sudden their time values are just a little different. There's more characters in there, so we have to take account for that. Okay. So we build this with for the SQL statement. Okay. And so what we do is, and we take the value that we have. Like if this were text, I take the value that's come in that I've read from the data source, and then I put a quote in front of it and a quote in back of it. Okay. And if it's a varchar, I do the same thing. But if it's decimal, big, and all of those numerics, you know, there's really nothing that I do to have to put in the single quotes. And we also notice that there are some differences. A lot of the fields, like here, real, numeric, int, date, these are common data types that I'm finding between SQL Server, Postgres, MySQL, SQLite. They're all handled pretty much the same way. It's just when you get into these exceptions down here, where each database is different. See if I break it out. Here's MS SQL. They've got money and small money. Okay, and then we come down to Postgres, and it's got int 8, big serial, serial 8. Their text or their characters are called character. And this brings up something I had just remembered. The character data type. Okay, so character, and then you can specify how many characters you want, and it works well. You go over to Hyperfile Classic, and character is 1 character. It's no more. So there was, I'm learning all these different things that are happening between all the different types of databases. Okay, so that's how we format for each of the fields that are going.
Thank God we have an ANSI standard for all that, right, Glenn?
Exactly. Yeah, that does really well.
You don't think it is? Oh man, it's.
Yeah. Well, in my naivety, I was thinking it would all work the same. And I started off on this because when I had first done it in Hyperfile, it really wasn't difficult. So
and I got involved.
Yeah, and then I said, okay, I'm really rewriting this, and I'm going to do it with SQL because that's the biggest. That was the biggest bang for the buck with trying to get this done. Then I get it working nicely, and I said, okay, this is going to really be easy to put in Hyperfile Classic. I had done this before. Wrong. Everything now is an exception. So now I had the code for that, doing it a little differently. Okay, that was the aside. So we had just looked how we handle if it's a SQL field. Now, if it is a coming from HListItem, we handle it differently because each of the values are different. So no longer is it coming back within quotes of what type of field it is, the bit, the tiny int, those kinds of things. Now we have these values of HItem binary, HItem character. But I pretty much do the same kind of thing. You know, you can see that we still put the quote before and quote after. Okay. Now, the biggest thing that we have to work with, and let's see if I can go find that, is we're not working with an analysis at all. We are just using what's coming into us. Let's go import U. Let's go look at global procedures, local procedures. Let me move this up. I'm looking for tables. Tables populate and tables fetch, maybe. Okay. Okay, so when we're working with our tables and we're not working with the schema, we actually can use HListFile to give us back a list of the files, right? Which is really handy. The other thing then, once we have our HListFile, is we can do, and that might be on the next screen, is HListItem. So HListFile, well, first of all, we have HListProvider, returns all our providers for us, so we can know what databases we have registered or drivers we have registered with our application. Which brings up just a small point in version 20 now. HListProvider has a small bug in it, in that it does not register or show that you've got native drivers for Postgres or MySQL. It does recognize SQL Server, so that was something I'd worked around a little bit. Then we have HList file, which brings back a list of the files. Then we have HListItem, which brings back a list of those items with all of the attributes. And of course, that's what we were using, and I had showed before. If we go to table populate, and I'm hoping this is the one here, maybe not. Let's go take a look at, let's find our first one. I'm just going to look for H. For external. Okay, so let's just go look at these. The biggest thing that we needed to do, and this is the key to this whole thing, is declare external. You give it a full path, and so in this case, like for HF Classic or dBase, you actually give it the full path of the file, including the file name, so it can find it. Then you declare what do you want to call it within the context of the application. So you'll have C:\/ yada 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 / my database.fic, and we want to actually call it as just my database. And so we would give that the alias. And then you give it the connection that you're working with, okay? And so you'll notice that when we work with HF Classic or dBase, it's slightly different than if it were HFSQL, okay? It's still the same format. We still give it where it's coming from and what we're going to call it. And then for everything else, at least for right now, because these are just doing the major ones, and so this would do all the SQL. We still do that. And what I'm doing is I go through and I get my HListItem, or I get it from the schema. I'm going to store in the table, col_table, that field, the actual table name that we're using. And then I give it a call, or the table as it comes in from the database. Then I give it the alias of what we want to use it in here. So when we actually go, let's go back over here. Let's go to Global Procedures, Import, and if we do Import Tables. Okay, if we come down and, okay, here we're going to read every single record right here of the mapping, so we can process one line at a time. But what we're actually going to be doing is, here's my, if I'm using Hyperfile Classic and I want to do an HAdd, I just keep building my line for HAdd. It's this field equals this value, this field equals this value. If we're doing SQL, and I'm trying to see where that line's at. We're actually building a line called SInsert, I believe. And so as we leap through all of that, then what we come down is we do a, here's our line, SInsert, and we're going to take our template that we showed before up top, we're going to put in our values, and then all we do is we execute this. So for every record that we loop through, we get the mapping for every row, so we're only going to process the fields that we've got mapped. So we may have 100 fields in the table, but if we're only going to map 3, then those are the 3 that I'm concerned about, reading and writing. So what I do is I build that template that says select these 3 fields, right? And because I know what my mapping is, I know the from fields and I know the to fields. So at that same time, I can also build my generic insert. I take the same fields in the same order from my select, and I use them for my insert. And then I just build that line for those 3 fields. And so that's what we have here when we're all finished with this. And we do an HExecuteSqlQuery. So for right now, every single record that we read, we write 1 record back. Yes, I know there's other ways we could do this. We probably could do it where we, 2 different ways. I can bundle a whole bunch of these SQL statements together and send them up or execute them as once, and that drastically cuts down. And the other way we can do that is with some databases, you can do that insert into and using multiple values or multiple records. what I'm getting right now is because I'm getting a 1-for-1 when I run this. In fact, let's run this so we can make it fail. Let's go to Postgres to SQL Server. And I don't need to verify or look what tables those are. Let's go here. And I'm not taking my primary key across. And so what I want to do is take the primary key across. I want to map it. And let's see, we'll close this. And so now we'll go and run that one. Okay, let's do that. Let's turn this off down here. We'll run it. Okay, import ran but with errors. View the error log now. So now you can see in the records that we tried, now we can say cannot insert explicit value for the identity column. And we'll also see that it is from the physical row 1 and physical row 2 when we're reading that record. So we could go back if we needed to look at the data for some other reason. Maybe they had a embedded character in there that we've come across before, and it wouldn't work with saving the record. We could go back, look at the data possibly, and manipulate that. So now if I go back into this record, oh, that's not the one. Was it? It was the, sorry about that. It was the Postgres, I think, to SQL Server native. Nope. Nope. No. And if we come down here, I get rid of this. I delete that. Say yes. Close it. We'll go run that. Now, theoretically, this should run, and it does. So we've not gotten to great depth of the coding in here. I will say that pretty much everything that we have in here comes from and builds upon what we've done, what we've all gone through with the training materials that we offer. We're doing, as mentioned before, HList provider, HList file, HList item. We're also doing, as you can see here, the execute code. So, because we're building some things to run, and then we just execute that, and that's how we're also doing the W language that we allow before and after the import, before and after the table, before and after each field, and then we're kind of doing that also with our default value and things. Are there any questions that anybody's got in any particular area that you want to see? It's pretty much straightforward. It's just that it's taken so much time to build this. I've been working on this since the middle of December, and the whole philosophy behind this is select your source database, your target database, your source table, your target table, and then map those fields together. And then it's a matter of finding what the attributes are for each of them, and then build a proper SQL statement or build a proper HAdd lines, and then execute that at once and do an HAdd on it.
And do you understand that there are certain data types that are not supported?
Yeah.
Or certain file types that are not supported? And Arnold, just in case you're wondering.
Well, yeah, and I do hope to be able to get to ODBC, but as of right now, that's a whole horse of another color.
Yeah.
But that is on my plans, and it's also on my plans to get to XML, so we could go both ways with that. So I still need to look at those.
You've done a tremendous amount of work with it. This
has come a long way. And if anybody's interested in this product, I have it out on www.wxtraining.us. Mm-hmm. And you're free to use this if you purchase it. You're free to use that in your applications. Just don't sell it as a standalone product of your own of a universal import-export, but you certainly can use it in any application that you've got.
Okay, I'm hoping I'm seeing where the questions are, because since Tim's not out, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not seeing any questions at the moment. You want to show them a little tidbit of your version 20 stuff, what they're doing?
What we were showing?
Yeah, you got about 30 minutes or so, a little less than 30 minutes. You can
I'd be glad
fill in
to.
a little bit there, and you can tell them what else you're putting in your
I'd be glad
your training materials that you've been working on.
Yep. Okay. So let me take this down. And in fact, those of you who do like the mapping kind of stuff, and you've got the training, go back and take a look where we start building the generic SQL, and we also do the business rules kinds of things. Everything's based on that. There's really no black box that I have. It's just the time that it's taken to ferret through everything there. Okay, let me load this up. So now we're working with version 20, and 20 is a hoot.
Yeah.
It's got some really neat stuff in here.
Yeah, we will be having webinars on certain things that are coming out in 20 before the developers conference, and that's going to be in October. Some of the things that we're going to be showing there is based upon version 20, which everybody should be looking to upgrade since you know, the dollar is strong enough against the euro now. And they're coming out so you got the pre-release out now. They're fixing to release out another one. I don't know if it's going to be the gold final or another pre-release patch. We'll know for sure, but there's been a few things that they're still fine-tuning that they're going to be throwing out with deals, and there's some excellent features when we're talking about now doing the entire mapping itinerary structure on the WINDEV side as well as the mobile. And also parallel task is probably one of the most interesting features that I've been working with and trying to get situated, and supposedly we'll have that situated for long, and we'll do a webinar on that because I think that is very important for anybody that has a lot of files and things like that that they have to deal with, or cloud-based systems, things like that. So go ahead, Glenn.
So this is using the mapping control, and yesterday was the first day that I had even looked at the mapping control in version 20. So, I mean, to have gone from nothing with this to where we're at is pretty impressive, in that that's what PCSoft is giving us and exposing to us, and is not a third-party tool. I mean, it's just a matter of delving in. Now, there's a whole bunch of things more I need to learn. Granted, I just got into this, but it's so powerful. And as I was mentioning to Andy and Pete before, I had done a mapping application for the city of Chicago way back when. And this literally is 100 times less code to get this far compared to what we used to have to do. And even with the Google Maps that we did a couple versions back, where you get the license and you had to do this and you had to do that, I mean, there were literally like 30 different steps and code, you know, lines of code you had to do. Here, you pretty much plop it on, you do 5 lines of code, 3 lines of code, and you've got something. So let me show you what you've got. And this is just Hyperfile right now, and it's a parent-child relationship. I have a master file of my routes, and I have detail of all the stops. And so I'll select Route 1, and you can see it maps it rather quickly. And what we're doing is, and we'll look at that code, what we're using is the address here. We have 2 choices that I see when you add an itinerary or you map an itinerary. You can give it an address, or you can give it your latitude and longitudes. Okay, and as of today, I'm not saying how I mix and match those together. It would be nice. I'm sure there's a way. I just haven't investigated that far. So for right now, I'm just doing addresses, and you can see it is not a complete address. You really just need the street number, the street, and the zip code, and that's close enough. Or if you don't have the zip code, give it the city and state, and it works. Okay.
Yeah, I got a question for you, Glenn, real quick.
Yeah.
From Marco, wanted to know if the webinar source is available. For what you're talking about.
Yeah, for the import.
Yeah, for the import.
Yeah. No, it's not. If what I'm doing is I'm actually selling that product. It's not part of my training, so people don't have to go out and do it. purchase training. They just purchased the import, which includes all the source code. And the reason why is I've been on this since December 15th, and I have buku hours in here. I just can't give that away. It's all based on my training, so if you've got the training materials, you can easily recreate that, although it'll take tons of hours. So the short answer is no, it's not available as source.
But it will be available for purchase.
It is, yes, and it's on my website, and I actually have a very good introductory pricing on that. But I just don't want to belabor that point. If you're interested, www.wxtraining.us, and it's out there.
Yeah, and just to add to that just a little bit, a couple of the other little features that he's got in there that, and the reason why I'm getting it from him as well is that you're able to use it as a component and plug it into your application, so that way if someone is using your application as an intermediary, I'll give you an example. We have an application that does exports and imports to other databases, so we tie them down just to the two tables that they can import and export to, and that's the only ones that they can work with. It allows you to do things like that. So I think it's an excellent product across the board. Now, as far as the mapping is concerned, I mean, that's up to Glenn. I would, you know.
I'm planning on taking the mapping and actually putting into my training materials. So those of you who still have the training materials and a subscription to it, it will be in version 20 in the not too distant future at all. I have to decide whether I will release it as source for the webinar or not. I have not made that decision. I do know that I want to release it in some form or another. But and I know we're switching back just a bit, but Andy had just brought up something, and what I want to do is, if I can just do this quickly. This is 20. It is import B. Just two things I want to show. When you include it as a component, what I want to do is I don't want. We had those menu choices up top for drivers and servers for setup. When you include it as a component in your own application, you probably don't want them getting into that area, so they can go and change the servers and all those kinds of things. So we limit this, that it's really locked down. They can't go in and do any of that kind of stuff. And as you can see, it really was a simple thing to do. I have an HF file out there. It's got 2 lines of code, one for each hiding the menus, and I just execute that code, and it's locked down that way. The other thing is Andy had just mentioned that we can lock down the tables that you want. So if we actually go, and let's just do this real quickly, and I hate digressing, but I think it's worth mentioning. We go to server list, we go to Postgres native, I believe. I do this, say yes. There is just the one table that I have locked down. Granted, I only have 3. Oh, I have 10 tables or so. But what I've done is, rather than use HListItem that will go to the database, to the connection, and find out all the tables, you actually can give it an allowable list in the server setup. So if you have 1 table, 5 tables out of 100 or whatever you've got, we can say these are the only tables that you can work with. So when you actually do the mapping, my data, let's just go to access. Access, find that file, do that, the connection, no, go back. You can see on the left-hand side that is the only table that I have, as opposed to the 5 or 10 or 100 or whatever there would be. Okay. So thanks for mentioning that. I think that just makes it easier to lock things down when you include that as a component. And it can either be a component or it can be a standalone, and you can make it a service. You could make it on a schedule, and you could run it as often as you need to. Okay. Let's just go back. Check it. Nope, I should have checked it. We'll go back to the mapping, and let's take a look at that, because this mapping is just so way cool in here. So we select route number 2. And what's kind of nice that we can do in here is, let's just move this up 2 spots. Let's map the route again. And now you'll see how it's changed. And there may be some things that maybe stop G is actually stop E, and everything's out of order. So you can actually just change the order that you want, right? Remap it and make sure that that's what you want. So is it the most efficient way that you want to do this? So we'll look at that code, how we map it. And then the other thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to simulate that if you were somebody out of the field has a handheld device, and their handheld device is communicating via web service, right? So in the office, you want to know where they're at on the route. So what we had to do was just simulate that right now. But so not only does it simulate it, so we know it kind of works this way. When you're running this, they'll send it out, and you know that where it will be on the route or not on the route and where they're at. So let's look at the route activity. Okay. So yes, we know the truck's traveling backwards.
It'll go forward on the top side.
It will. That's the flip side. It will do it. So, and I'll show you how I had done this to at least, you know, simulate what was happening. But it is kind of cool in that if you've you're in your office and you've got multiple routes, multiple trucks, we can see where they're at any one time. Now, there's thoughts about this of expanding this because this is just a work in progress. Started yesterday. And that's using the same paradigm of the parent-child relationships, route names and route detail, and then being able to put it in tabs. I mean, you want to explain that where we think we might be going with that?
Yeah, part of this stuff is stuff I'm looking in Pete and Glenn and I have been working with together a little bit to do some experimentation and stuff. But they have a wonderful new feature in WINDEV 20. It's kind of a tear off tabs. Basically, it's like the Google tabs, which you can hit the plus and create a new tab on the browsing pages and stuff. So the thoughts is that you would have a listing of your routes, and if you wanted to compare routes or compare route methods and the directions they're going, and you might say, you know, it's better that if I take this one location because it overlaps this other route to move it to the other route instead. Well, it allows you to basically set up multiple routes using those tabs, and you can see the mapping of each route on the tabs. Plus be able to pull it off the tabs and switch it to a different screen entirely if you have multiple screens. So there's some great advantages to those tabs in being able to do it, and that's kind of where it's going to end up before it's all said and done. And when we get to developers conference, that's one of the things that I'll be showing is all of the mapping technology and how to do all the mapping technology between the WINDEV and the mobile device and web services and multi-tabs and everything we've kind of fiddled around with between now and then is what I'm going to be showing down at the developers conference, how to do it and everything with it.
And this example, as I move through with more features, this will also be in the training materials. And this, more than likely, I'll show the basics, since Andy's going to go into it more in depth. When we go to the conference, I'll probably just do a cursory review of this at our developers conference based on that training material. So let's, I was going to say, let's look at some code, but I want to run this one more time. I want to show something here. So let's go to Route 2 again, and I've got an address here. So maybe you got your route all established, and you say, okay, I need to add a new stop in there, and I need to verify it. So here's the address I want to put in. The location was found, and this is kind of nice because there's other technologies out there that you can give it an address and send it to it and verify whether it's true or not. We can do the same thing here, but without having to make an additional purchase, which is kind of cool. And once you have that done, we can then get the map position. There's a whole bunch of things that we can get off of this map just through the W language code. And so this here becomes key. I'm able to take an address and then I don't know if that added in here, did it? It did. It just added that in here, and also gave me the latitude and longitude for that. Well, as we're here, we also can go down and look at a satellite view and say, hey, where is this place and what's it look like? So we're there. And there's always more things that we want to do, but as we let's do this.
You can switch to Street View too, or not?
Yeah, you can.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, let's go back to here. And so I've got everything up here. Here's where this is way the heck down there, right? So I'd have to zoom in on the mapping now. So here's our original one. You can see how far out that is from the route. So that may not make sense to add that to that route down here. Yeah. So, but what I want to do though, maybe we'll see if it'll work. All right. Let's go back up here, and let's look at that route activity again, and see if it's gonna. There we go. Okay. So let's start looking at the code, and then we'll maybe finish up somewhere around the route activity and say how we had done that. Let's go to the...
Just a quick question here.
Yeah.
Yes, Marco, he's going to be having that. And if you're talking about the database trans, what he says, I didn't understand it pretty well. This material will be available in the next Glenn's training material or after the WINDEV's conference.
It'll be in my, the import?
The import is
Yeah.
a separate
Product.
item that you can get off of his website.
Yeah,
Marco.
includes all the source code.
It includes all the source code, so you can buy the whole thing off of his website. The mapping will be in his training material.
Yes, and that will be shortly. As soon as I get some more functionality in here, I will be updating. Actually, what I'll do is I'll put it in when I release it for 20, so we know when 20 goes gold, my training materials will be updated for 20 by then, if not before. Okay, let's take a look at the first thing that we want to do, and this is we're going to take an address and we're going to map display position. So you give it the map that you're working with, you give it an address, okay, and you do that, creates it on the map. And then to get the position back, right, and up here we'll say position is a geo position, right? And so we then say map get position. It returns to us whatever information is stored in that my position, which is a geo position. And I know we at least have the latitude and longitude. And there may be more. I'll just have to look at it and see. But it's that simple. That's how you get to a position on a map and add it. And then here, that's how you get the information back on there. And then for those of you who have never done toast, right, which is basically a message that displays for a brief amount of time whatever you decide it to be, that's how you display a toast message, okay? And then I just add it to my my table that I process through. So that's simple how you do that. Put something on the map. And then how you map a route, okay? Okay. I mean, this is just so unbelievably simple. You have R steps. It's an array of strings, okay? And at this point, the itinerary or the mapping control actually will have control of that array, okay? So all we're going to do is you either, if you want to do one item at a time, you just add into your array the address that you want. Or if we were working with latitude and longitude, we would be doing that. And that syntax is, it would be a, in place of this, in fact, let's just do that. I'll just put this right here. I've got to check this out. Instead of this, we could, I believe, do this. Whatever, yeah. this would be your variable for latitude, this would be your variable for longitude within square brackets. Okay, so that's how you would do it that way. So in its simplest method right now, you do add to the array the address. And so for every record that I have in my table, I'm just adding it to that array. Then when I'm finished, I just do map add itinerary. You give it the map, you give it the array, you give it the mapping mode that you want to use, whether it's a car, or it's a pedestrian, or it was the third one, which I forget what it was. Okay. Then you give it the color that you want for the map route. Then you give it the opacity, and then you give it the line thickness. So one of the neat things that's, okay, of course, one of the nice things with that color is that, let's select a different color. Let's do yellow. Say okay. Now we'll take route number 2, and you can see the route's in yellow now. So you could actually, for each route that you have in that master table, we could store a different color. And then if you have multiple routes on there, you could actually see if they overlap or not, or where they're at. So there's some really cool things. Now, what I was trying to think, how the heck would we, let's run that so we can see. Let's get route number 2. Okay. I was thinking, how could we have something show up on here? And I'm thinking, what would be nice is if we had a set of coordinates between every single point. I don't know that that's available to us. I'm guessing it's not, but I will certainly make that suggestion. It would be nice to say, hey, between any 2 points, give me 100 evenly spaced coordinates in there. So I didn't see that happening, but as I'm looking at this, I'm also noticing that if you look in the bottom here, hovered coordinates, as I move my mouse on here, and again, let's remember, this map image, it's an image. And what we're doing is, the whole tool is it's translating our X and Y coordinates into latitude and longitude. So I'm thinking, okay, since I don't see how we get back a set of them, what I want to do is I want to figure how can I grab each one of these, right, coordinates, and just save it to a table. So what I did is in here, in the right button down, okay, I use this one line of code, and what it does is, first of all, hover geoposition is a geoposition, and as we had looked at that before, we know we can get back latitude and longitude. So all I do is make a call to it, right, and I give it with the map info XY. All I give it is the coordinates of the map, right, of where our mouse is. So it translates that, calls it map info XY, makes it into a geoposition, which then gives us our latitude and longitude. So for every right mouse click that I do, and granted, this is for a demo, that's all it's for, so we can simulate some movement on there. I grab that for every single coordinate, and I add a record. And so now, when I actually do the route activity, all I do is I go through that table, and it happens to be a query, so it's putting it in the proper order, and it's using it just for this route, and I map delete marker. So if there were any existing markers on there, I want to delete it because I'm only showing the activity on here. I then read in my coordinates for latitude and longitude, and then I say my marker dot position equals my position, which is latitude and longitude, and I map add the marker. So that's how that truck keeps moving around, just because it's reading a loop in here and repositioning it. Now remember, when Andy gets this implemented from the handheld device, there's no need for this for looping through the field, the file. We will still have to map it using map add marker, but the data will be coming in different. So this kind of just basically simulates that. So in a nutshell, that's the mapping. And if you take a look at the mapping control, there's relatively little here. We have a display mode of just map or satellite by default as we come up. And then we have display the zoom buttons if you want to zoom in, or you can double click on it to move it. And then allow scaling by double clicking, so you move into that zoom is what they're doing. And when we ran this, right, let's select route 1. Now, we are at zoom level 14. When I go to route 2, we are now at zoom level 17. So it automatically knows or tries to figure the best zoom level to be able to present this on the screen for us. So there's some really neat things that it does with a control that has very few properties set up in the 8 tabs. So hope that whets your appetite for mapping. I'm sure we'll be discussing more things in the future, and like Andy said, he'll be doing that at the DevCon. But the tool they gave us is just phenomenal to start with.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's these 2 things.
We're it.
Yeah, that's it for.
Well, I hope that everybody kind of got a good view of how to do the translations between deals. That's an excellent product. Anytime that you're getting into somebody else's data and need to move it back and forth, it's going to be extremely important, especially in a commercial aspect. And the mapping is cool stuff too. That's going to be the fun part, because we're going to be dealing with in American Litho, we're going to be dealing with sending people to and from different places for pickup and delivery of materials, and that's what I'm wanting to play with it for.
The one thing that I want to point out with the universal import with that conversion there is, since source code is included, which I don't know of any other mapping conversion utilities out there where you get source code, is that it is a great place for one to learn, if you don't have the training, some of that HListItem, those kinds of things, or if you do have the training, to at least build on it. But it gives you a great place to start for putting in enhancements. You've got a data type in there that I don't have, or you need some kind of cast conversion that we're not doing in the SQL, because it pretty much goes from field type to field type is what we're doing. It's just a great place to start. And then with this mapping, we'll look at extending this, but I cannot stress enough how great the product is from PCSoft. I mean, yeah. I got 20, and it's like Christmas all over again.
They're doing some wonderful things. There'll be further webinars on this. Next week, we'll be getting back to the classes. We've talked a little bit abstract classes last week. Next week, we will run over and discuss implementing the abstract class into a class and using it and seeing how that works. And moving forward, at least we're going to do that far, and probably getting into building the first application utilizing that abstract class and the manager class, and how to do the file manager class. So there'll be more work towards that to see how things are put together. Other than that, we are about done. I would say, all I can say is be good or be good at it. We will see you next Friday. Talk to y'all later.